5 factors that you need to take into consideration to overcome your lower back pain and start rebuilding your spine. So we're going to go through 5 slides and talk about these 5 factors. But first, what I should say is exercise alone isn't the solution. Now, we are going to be talking about exercise. We are going to be talking about some other therapies, if you will. But we have to understand that exercise isn't the solution, because a lot of people, they want to just do some exercises so they can, in some respects, sort of feel better that they're strengthening their core. But this isn't going to cover all those bases, and it's not going to help the rebuilding of your spine if it's done in isolation. Number 1 is the building of muscular endurance. Now, what most people want to do is they want to build a strong core, and I think the terms endurance and strength do get mixed up, because endurance is basically the ability to hold a posture for a period of time whilst resisting fatigue. So it's trying to offset that sort of burning sensation, that waste product build up in the muscle for a longer period of time. Strength is the sort of the absolute ability of the muscle to hold a maximal weight, if you will, or an applied against an applied force. So it's more absolute strength, and then you've got the endurance, which is over a period of time. And what we're talking about is over a period of time. So we've got some very simple exercises. So you've got the bird dog and you've got the bridge. Now they're just 2 very simple exercises. There are more that you can use. But how do we build endurance? Well, it's very simple. What we need to do is we basically train. So we do our core training in intervals. Now, what does that mean? It might be that we do 10 seconds of work. So I'll just put a W by that. And then 5-second rest. And then we just keep repeating that cycle for the period of time. So it's just kind of taking it a step on from just holding 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it may be. Because what this rest break is doing, this little 5 seconds, is just giving the muscles an opportunity to allow some of that waste product to be removed. And you're building the body's ability to remove it, because essentially what you're saying is that you've got 5 seconds to get as much of this out as possible, and then your body will respond to that. And then what you basically keep doing is you just keep repeating that cycle. So instead of when the progress happens, you go, right, we're going to hold a 30-second plank instead of a 20-second plank. What we're saying is we're going to hold 2 blocks of 10 seconds, but now we're going to hold 3 blocks of 10 seconds. So we're building that endurance that is going to increase and improve the body's ability to remove that waste product, which is fatiguing the muscle, which is causing your back to seem weak. So when a lot of people say, I have a weak back, they don't have a weak back. They have an over-fatigued back that is trying to keep up with the amount of load that's being put through it. Factor number 2 is improving movement. And I've also added on exercise technique, because that can have a sort of contributing factor. But the main thing we're talking about here is the improving of movement. And one of the main and most important movements is this lifting movement. So we've got quite a deep hip hinge there, because we're lifting, or as you can see here, I'm lifting a weight from the floor. Now that could be a child, it could be a box, it could be whatever. There could also be sit to stand. That's another common movement where people experience pain, is when they're just getting up out of a seat. Now, all that's happening here is when we use poor posture, the stress and tension gets directed to specific areas of the body. When we use improved movement or improved exercise technique, that same amount of stress is getting spread around. So it's not concentrated into one area. So if I was to have a nicely rounded spine here, a lot of the pressure and tension is going to go on this part of the lower back. But if I can go into more of a neutral range, what happens when I go into let me just do a very loose diagram of a disc and the fluid within it. We'll call this the front. We'll call this the back. When I flex, I push down on the front of the disc, and that pushes all of this fluid towards the back, encouraging it to migrate its way through the disc like so, which will then eventually or certainly contribute towards a bulging disc or a herniated disc. When I go into more of a neutral range, this concentration doesn't happen towards the back of the disc. It happens all the way around. So it's much more evenly distributed around. So again, it's not concentrating towards the back, it's concentrating all the way around. So if we can do that, if we can improve the movement, that's just one example, and that's in the disc. The muscles of the hips are going to work much better. We're going to get a much better balance between stress on the hip, stress on the knee, and stress on the spine. Same with the shoulder. So there's all these different aspects, and we're basically just balancing this stress and tension around the body. So when we improve the movement, it's going to be much more effective in the way that we're not going to be causing as much of a problem so quickly. Factor number 3, and this is a little bit more to do with exercise, and we could talk about movement as well. Building the gluteal group and the lateral core. So what we're talking about are the buttock muscles here and the oblique QL muscles here. Now I've added the bird dog in because it is a nice exercise to be able to activate the glutes. But what we also get is a stability through the shoulder, through the spine, and through the hip. So it's a very good sort of balancing exercise. So these three certainly are a very effective sort of model of exercises to begin with. Because if we can activate the glutes, that's taking stress and tension away from the lower back and starting to put it on the hips. So if we can get the hips working, the back muscles don't need to work as much. If we can get the lateral core working, so here and here, again, that's going to sort of remove any shear stressing. Shear stressing. And also, it's going to sort of rebalance any asymmetries, because that's another contributing factor to bad backs or bad lower backs. So again, if we can sort of readdress those balance, and the same will be left to right glute as well. Not only glute max, we've also got glute medius, glute minimus on the side of the hip. So again, all of this is going to go towards reducing that problem and not only overcoming the problem, but rebuilding the spine as well in a more effective way. Number 4, optimizing spine load. Now, what this basically means is kind of a culmination of everything that I've talked about so far. So if we've got the glutes working, if we've got glute max working, if we've got glute medius, glute minimus working, if we use side planks and we get the obliques working, the QL working, we can stabilize the pelvis. We can then use movement to be able to distribute, or proper movement to be able to distribute stresses, because life will put stress onto joints. There's no way we can eliminate that. It's always going to happen. We can just put our bodies in the most effective position. So if we can do that, we're going to be, as I mentioned before, spreading stresses all the way around, front, back, either side of the discs, of the hip joints, getting the balance between the hip joint and the lower back sort of readdressed, getting the balance between the hips and the knees, so on and so forth. So optimizing the spinal loads doesn't mean eliminating it. It means getting that happy medium, because there's no way of eliminating it. All that we can do is optimize or minimize it, but we do need the stresses to be able to heal correctly, because this is where the bed rest advice falls down, because the body does need stress, so it knows where to adapt, it knows what parts of the body to adapt, it knows what parts of the body to heal, so it's using the proper technique, so that's optimized. Because if we use poor technique, as I've mentioned previously, it's going to put excessive stress on the area. We don't want that. We just want a well-balanced, optimized stress on the area, and that comes from doing the correct exercises, doing the correct movements. It could also mean, goes back to the introduction, it could also mean using like a massage therapy to reduce any tension, could be using stretching, could be using foam rolling, could be using all these different techniques to be able to get the muscles, the joints, the tendons, the ligaments, to get into the proper position and removing excess stress away from the area. Finally, number 5 is maintaining this neutral range. And what I mean by neutral range, this is a neutral posture of the entire spine. Now, I guess the most important part, certainly with lower back pain, is this lumbar area. So maintaining this neutral range through the lumbar spine. So that comes with that hip hinge posture that I talked about, so the lifting posture. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to use that exact posture, which is, and then you've obviously got the arms coming down, so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean you have to use this position because the hips are much higher than the knee. There may be times where you need to go onto one leg and do a sort of a single leg lift, as it were, or you may need to go into more of a squat style type of lift. Again, if it's getting up out of the seat, then you're probably going to use more of a squat style. So you've got all these different ways of lifting, but whenever we do that, what we want to try and do is maintain that sort of natural inward curve of the lower spine, or at least within a sensible range. What we don't want to be doing is overly flexing the spine, because as I've mentioned, this material is going to start migrating. And if we've already got lower back pain, then you'll basically just keep pressing that button to instigate that happening again. So what we need to do is use these 5 factors as best we can throughout life, because life is going to throw us some curveballs sometimes, and it's going to cause some problems in, can we maintain the neutral range? Can we use specific movements, or can we use specific ways that we've trained for movements and use them? So there's all these different things that sort of life is going to challenge us with, but we've got to make the best and use these 5 factors to start, in some respects, removing any pain triggers so we can overcome the lower back pain. And then what it will start to do is it will start to rebuild the spine in due course. And then it would be then using exercising, stretching, some sort of therapy, foam rolling, all these different things, depending on the type of back pain that you have. So if you want to find out more about that, click the links down in the description and you can come through onto my online course, or the online course and consultation, where you can sit with me and we can discuss your lower back pain and build a tailored specific plan for you. So hopefully that will be helpful for you. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Chris Fold Training. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.